Hello, everyone. Welcome to Something to Talk About Live. My name is Liz Owen. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Director of Communications at P-Flag National. It's great to have you with us for another diversity and inclusion conversation. As always, our show host is here with me, our Director of Learning and Inclusion, Jean Marie Nevada.
Liz Owen.
Jean Marie Nevada.
I wish people could see how you always make me giggle before this starts. And every single time this show starts, I'm sure this is the last time somebody's going to let me do it because I can't stop laughing. Okay. Strong Brittany. Okay, we're doing this. It's a really interesting conversation today, and I'm super excited about this.
People are already watching. We're starting to watch 5 minutes before we went live. So people are here and they're ready.
Then we are so ready for this conversation. Maybe I will see you if we have some questions, but otherwise, thank you, Liz.
You bet.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jean Marie Nevada. My pronouns are she and ella. And every single week we get together to talk about something related to LGBTQ inclusion. And this week we are having a really interesting conversation and one that I'm extremely excited about because it is an area that I am doing my best to learn about. And I still have a lot to learn. And that is about asexuality and aromanticism. So first thing that you need to know is we have a really fascinating article about it for you. It was in LGBTQ Nation by Tyler Stevenson. And it was entitled, "It's Time to Start Celebrating Black Asexuality in Media." So a completely different twist on this conversation again. And let me tell you a little bit about our guest before we bring him in. We have today with us Marshall Blount. And so Marshall became involved in asexual activism after several negative reactions as he came out to people as asexual. He became a board member of Asexual Outreach in 2020. He was involved with Erie's LGBTQ Council until June 2020 when he did resign because of how the mayor responded to the George Floyd murder. And he eventually joined the Pennsylvania Commission on LGBTQ Affairs, where he continues his work on a governmental level. He really centers his work on the Black asexual experience, and he's extremely vocal about it. And I will also say very funny on social media outlets such as Twitter. And with that, I would like to introduce Marshall Blount.
Hello.
Hello, Marshall.
How's it going?
It is going well. And I should have mentioned the gentle giant ace. Like, that is like the best name ever. And it sort of comforted me. I'm like, I'm going to be okay.
Oh, yes. My mom gave me that. My mom gave me the name Gentle Giant because of my height. So it's kind of like, why not add it to my identity?
I think it's perfect. I think it's really, really good. So you and I have exchanged so many emails. I told you how excited I am about this because I think it's such an area for me to learn about, and I'm really grateful for you to be here. So in the same way I would ask a superhero a question, tell me what your origin story is, Marshall. Like, how did you begin to understand more about your identity? What was it that got you there? And did you even have the words to talk about it?
I actually always had an idea that I was different from anyone that I was around. Anyone's around. Of course, my origin story started in 1993, well, February 16, 1993, in Erie, Pennsylvania. Growing up, I had the typical childhood, kind of like traveling, et cetera, school. I was homeschooled from third grade up. But in my teens, I started to kind of question myself in terms of sexual orientation. That did not stick out all the way until I was in my early 20s. Yeah, and my sister-in-law, I actually came out to my sister-in-law first.
Really?
Yes.
And why was it that you didn't yet have kind of the language for it, or was it there just was nothing out there and you were kind of feeling isolated?
I did not have a language for it. I didn't know that there were communities that I can go into that where people like me. My sister-in-law sent me a link to a website. I forgot what website it was, but it was listing different identities, and one of them happens to be asexual. And I literally looked at the definition, and I was like, "Yep, that's definitely that's where I fall."
Oh, wow. So that must have, wow, what a great role for an ally for her to
Oh
share
yeah.
that with you. And what a great moment that must have been for you. And I should have asked this earlier for those people who might be newer to this conversation.
Mhm.
If you had to explain asexual identity to somebody, how would you do that?
Um, I normally will send them a link to the organization I'm currently on. It's Asexual Outreach, or there's another big one called AVEN, which is the Asexual Visibility Education Network.
Yes.
Um, basically, or just say that asexuality is having little to absent sexual attraction towards other people. Um, it's a wide spectrum, and also it's just important to note that because it's a conversation that's happening like big time, where a lot of people think that people who are asexual are all aromantic, which is aromantic is a romantic orientation.
Yes.
Um, not everyone in the ace community is aromantic, and not every aromantic is asexual. Sometimes those identities can cross, sometimes they don't. But I'm an example that I am arrow, ace, and gray ace. Or not gray ace, but gray romantic.
And could you, I actually started to study about more terms like Greyromantic. Could you explain Greyromantic to people, please?
For me, gray romantic is kind of like having, just often romantic attraction towards people, but very, 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 very seldom. Like
Yes.
it's often not. I identify somewhere between gray romantic and aromantic. That's how wide I identify.
I think it's really fascinating as we talk more about people's identities in the same way that on the sexual orientation conversation, and looking at that, we became so much more expansive, even inside of some of these spaces, inside of ace spaces, era spaces. There are all of these degrees and all these spectra. And I think it's a really fascinating conversation that there's sort of no monolith on this. It's pretty expansive. Do you find that more people are becoming familiar with the language? Because I'm seeing things like gray sexual and stuff popping up more
Mhm.
in pretty mainstream articles.
I say that the 2020s are definitely a very asexy era where we it's a good way to describe it, because it's a lot there's more people being open about how they identify, more people speaking out, being speaking out about who we are, and it's definitely very vital to people who are kind of exploring themselves.
And I think that this week's article actually talked about representations of ace people in mainstream media, and actually talked about the show Legends of Tomorrow and two of the characters there. But the author actually argued that many of these characters are not very representative of this spectrum that we're talking about, that it is not just one way to be. Beyond the lack of racial inclusion, which I definitely want to talk about, do you find that that the sort of examples of representation are a little slow to catch up with the larger conversation that's happening, or are you seeing some good stuff?
I think it's definitely to getting to the point where we want to be. I think we're kind of getting to the point where we are seeing more Black ace representation, but we've got a long way to go. You still have to fight a lot of racism in the space. You have to kind of build space where we can actually express ourselves without any limitations, and the more we do that, the more we get to the point where we want to be. Like for myself, seeing Yasmin Benoit was one of my largest inspirations, and the Asexual Goddess, it was also another inspiration for me to come out and want to jump into ace activism.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So the article that we were looking at this week, the author noted that as a Black ace man, there's sort of an implication that he's not a real man, because he
Mhm.
does not have this sort of traditionally understood sexual existence.
Mhm.
And he said there are so many stereotypes that attach sexuality and sort of a strong sexual character to Black men. Have
Mhm.
you encountered this? Because I think, there have been so many conversations about ace identities. But I've never sort of thought about what a lot of these racial stereotypes layered on top of it does to that discussion. So do you agree with his statement? What has your experience in this space been? Have you run up against that?
I definitely agree. There is a stereotype that Black men and women are hypersexual, and often a lot of people erase our identities because of that. Like a lot of people just assume our sexual orientation or romantic orientations, and that's one stereotype that has a long way to break down, because it not only it's not only discussion. It's not only a discussion that is to be had within our communities as Ace people or Arrow, et cetera, et cetera. It's also a conversation that we had to have in the Black community, in terms of like it's a complex experience.
Yeah. And are there any? Can you talk about some of the ways this conversation is starting to sound? Do you find that it's becoming an easier conversation to have? Are you still hitting a lot of resistance on it? Is it about the same as everywhere else, where there's still a ton of education that needs to be done?
I say the more that I and like people like me and Yasmin and this asexual goddess Sharonda, the more that we speak up about it, the more we're actually hearing more from other Black Ace people. So it's a lot. It's kind of a conversation that's getting not only bigger but very, 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 very informative. It shows that we're not a monolith, even within being the Black Ace community.
Yeah.
It's a journey to get. It's a journey as it is to get to the point where you want to be open about who you are. But it's another thing to find a community where you can openly express it constantly.
Yep. And to be validated around it.
Exactly.
I think it's an experience that so many people in the LGBTQ space have been lucky enough to have, but not everyone gets to experience that in the same way. And I think you're right. It's one thing to be able to talk about it, but then to be able to be received and welcomed and included equally, and not as though you're some sort of anomaly, that's what inclusion is about.
Yes.
So we've talked a little bit about, and you've mentioned it, and I got really excited when you said this, romantic orientation. And this is a term that I'm fairly new to. I have to admit it. My team was working on some learning materials last year, and that is where the whole concept was introduced to me. And the minute that I had it, I was so excited, because suddenly I had language to describe things I had never been able to describe before. And so I was incredibly grateful to the Ace and Arrow community for kind of forcing this conversation. So our article does focus primarily on Ace identities, but it does touch a little bit on the experiences of people who are aromantic, sorry. And do you find that people have a more difficult time understanding Arrow people over Ace people? Or is it about the same level of confusion?
I say because the conversation around like I don't from my personal experience, I don't find people to talk about Arrow like Arrow topics enough. I think a lot of people just go to like sexual orientation more, because it's more like, I think no matter what sexual orientation you are, that's where people like normally jump to. But I think romantic attraction is orientation is something that people should talk more about. And that's why it's important. Like, for instance, it's Arrow Week, which is a time where we can celebrate our identity, and we also like it's created spaces where people can come in and share their experiences while them being Arrow. So it's definitely a conversation that needs to be had more in terms of people going on their journey with discovering who they are.
I'm going to ask something I sort of didn't quite plan on, but are you finding that this conversation is a bit easier or more informed in queer spaces? Or do you find that this is still a tough one there? Just again, I know you can only speak from your experience, but I'd be interested to know about that.
Personally, I find it like it's a lot of people. I think that when I tell them that I'm Arrow, there actually doesn't seem to be as much like kind of like a like pushback, but at the same time, that's coming from my experience. But I know that there are a lot of people who I'll probably meet that one person one day that will be like, "What is that? Like, why do you identify that way?" Because we live in this society, and a lot of people are not as open about a lot of things. But I think again, this is the reason why it's important to be open with having a discussion about romantic orientations. But in regards, like, I didn't really have a issue explaining my my aromantic identity. But it's one of those things where it's kind of like wait and see. Like, it's like I tell people all the time that coming out is not just a moment; it's a journey. It's a lifelong journey.
We always joke it's not a one-time event. Like, you do it all the time
All the
and you
time.
don't even realize you're doing it sometimes because it's just who you are. It's
Yes.
fascinating to me. You don't think about it until you think about it, and suddenly you realize it's happening.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those things where it's kind of like I know one day, like, when it's safe to be out again, where people, like, hopefully this era has definitely taught people to be like more into listening to people. But so far,
We're working on it.
yeah, we're working on it.
We're working on it. It's a work in
Yeah.
progress. Are you finding that, because we just got a new batch of research, or polling rather, on how people identify in the United States, and again, it proves the largest group in the LGBTQ community are people who identify as bi, and it also broke down. Some of this polling breaks down by generation, and we are seeing younger people tend to be coming out earlier, tend to be more aware of what's going on. Are you finding that generationally there is more understanding about this conversation than there were with people who, let's say, are a little bit more seasoned in their lives?
I think this conversation actually comes with the fact that the internet, like, kind of became very expensive from the 1990s on to like now, and a lot of young people have access to the internet. A lot of people in the cities, mainly. We're still in a point where there's some certain spots where the internet is not as accessible. So I think that's the time where we alleviate that problem. We'll have people to kind of like who are out in the rural areas that are curious about, maybe they feel different about themselves, and maybe they can search the internet to see who they are. And again, that's why it's very important to have resources out there so people can see them.
It definitely, I so agree with you. And it always shocks me when I talk to people who sort of think that internet is for everybody. And I'm like, there are literally places you can go, probably in your state,
Yes,
that people don't have it.
Pennsylvania is expensive. Like, I live in like the largest city in this part of my state. But if you go an hour, like a half hour southeast of me, which is a vast rural, actually a park, an expensive park, you can't get that much. You can't get internet service there that good.
Yeah. And I think that is one of those things. It's a jarring experience when you actually go through it. It's fascinating, though, as you were talking about the internet has given people access to so much more. I just think about in maybe the last year and a half, 2 years, I have seen more and more when I'm on, websites for queer news, queer resources, stuff like that. I am seeing the ACE flag pop up. I am seeing the arrow flag pop up. I'm seeing it's there. And I think that's really exciting. And I have to give a lot of credit to the activists who have pushed this, because that was not the case even 3 or 4 years ago.
I mean, our goal of global domination is definitely on point. like that's the goal. It's just like it's just as an activist, it's very important to put as many resources out there as possible. So it's just like coming out at 22 to 23 around that area was one of those things where the internet made it easier for me to do it, because it's kind of like I can actually break down the definitions of these identities, and for it to be the internet that actually was for me to be able to connect with other people in the community as well. It helped me in my life personally, like big time, where I'm not alone. there are people out there like me, and also that now we're having a discussion about Black asexuality. Now there's now no people who are like me or my intersection out there that are connecting and sharing our stories.
It's exciting, and I think anyone who hasn't thought, oh gosh, maybe I'm the only one, doesn't understand how big it is when you hit that website and you're like, I'm not the only one.
Yes, and it's just also seeing, and also that's why it's very having access to the internet like I do, in a sense where I want to connect with my community. Also want to help and kind of like show people that Black asexual people exist as well, and Black aromantic people exist, or Black LGBTQI plus people exist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You still have a lot of people who stereotype, like, just say asexuality is a white thing, and it's not. It's a diverse community, but you still have people who kind of like don't acknowledge, but also they benefit from that stereotype. But slowly we are chipping away at that.
And I'm not trying to curry any favor here, but honestly, Marshall, it's because of people like you, people who are having this conversation, willing to go on the internet like this and just talk about it, that's happening. Because someone's going to see this who thought they were the only one, and it's going to be another door. So a lot of credit goes to you and to all the people who are doing this work, because it's not easy, especially when there's still so much misunderstanding. So every single week when we have this conversation, I always ask people what we're supposed to do, because, you know, we have a lot of P-flaggers watching. We love fixing things. It's what we do. We like figuring out how to be better and be more kind. So I'd love to talk about some of those ally behaviors in this space. What are some of those things that people should be doing to show up as allies for folks who are ace? Especially, I think a lot of people don't realize they may be saying or doing things that could be exclusionary, and it didn't even occur to you that that was the case until someone educates you. So could you talk to us a little bit about some of the start doing this, please, please, please stop doing this kind of behaviors?
I think definitely the thing is to like listen. If you want to contribute to community, like to help the community build more resources, donate to our causes. Asexual Outreach has a donation link on the website, and also indulge in ACE content on YouTube, TikTok, on Twitter, and books. It's very important that people listen to our stories and our experiences, and it's definitely one of those things where it's the thing that you can do, and it's also important not to get in the way, in a sense where people are like, which I've been told a few times, where just keep it to yourself keep it to yourself because such and such is not comfortable with it. No, like this is not. We're not going to have other people like be able to live their lives freely and not have one individual not be able to be themselves because someone feels uncomfortable, which that's bigoted in my opinion. Yeah, and I don't think people actually realize that when you do that, you're contributing to the bigotry towards LGBTQI plus people. Period.
Yeah.
And I just want people to understand that also that we're not going anywhere. So yeah, it's just be sure to listen and not just not get in the way, and help that person with their their journey, and also like it's also respect their boundaries as well. The boundaries are very important.
One of the things that I've read in doing my research and trying to be a better ally is the importance of believing people when they tell you that they're ace or they're arrow, and that this very much parallels a lot of people I know who are bi plus who talk about, you know, people tell it must be good that you're not sure, you haven't figured it out yet. How do you respond when people say things like that? Because I actually hear people say a lot. I've heard people say to people who say they're ace, you probably just haven't met anybody yet. And I think, oh,
I've gotten that many times. That's actually what pushed me into being an activist. Where people told me, "Oh, is there a pill for that? Or is there maybe you should see a doctor or a therapist. Maybe it's your hormones. Maybe you should get maybe you should get checked up. Like,
Gosh.
and a lot of people confuse, I think, with asexuality. Like, a lot of people confuse it with, oh, you don't want sex, where again, attraction and doing something is totally different things. I have like me being asexual doesn't mean I hate sex. It just means I have little to absent sexual attraction towards other people. And it's one of those things where people are just, and it's even people within LGBTQI spaces that often try to kind of like gatekeep asexual people away from the spaces, but we're part of the community. It's just, yeah, it's definitely a very mind-blowing experience in a sense where it's, yeah, people can do better.
People can do a lot better.
A lot better.
That was some serious rudeness that you hit over there. Like, that's crazy stuff.
It's also the reason why I don't go out. I don't go out. Like, if I go out, I'm going to a coffee shop. I always tell people, like, if you want an atmosphere, that's kind of calm and you can talk to people, don't go to the bars, because bars, people are drinking, people are going to be not thinking clearly, and it's one of those things where it's people, go to a cafe and just enjoy your time, relax there, and also go to Pride. Pride is if you're asexual, you belong at Pride like everyone else.
Yes. You know, I think sometimes it bothers me when I started hearing people talk about gatekeepers, because it's a real thing in many communities, and it's certainly true in this community. And I think for a community that has had to fight so hard to have space, it is absolutely mind-boggling to me when we behave exclusionary towards certain people in the community, who I think have such a fascinating perspective. I mean, it is because of the conversations, the people that you are leading, that we have a whole new lexicon to talk about different kinds of attraction, that it's not just sexual. There's romantic and there's sexual. It absolutely confuses me when it's really
weird. Because because it does damage to everyone in the community when you exclude if you exclude a whole entire community within your community. We're all family.
And we are family, and I'm better, I'm smarter, I'm hopefully a better person because of the work of people like you, because I've learned about stuff, and that wouldn't have happened if you didn't have access. So for the gatekeepers, you need to back off.
Yes.
And before I go any further and get myself in trouble, let me ask you one more question.
So, Marshall, for people who are looking for resources, so whether they think they may be Ace or Arrow, or maybe there's somebody who knows somebody, or people who just want to learn how to be better allies, can you make some suggestions to us? We are certainly rolling your Twitter handle across the bottom. We've got some. What would you say?
Definitely check out. You can follow me on Twitter at Ace Gentle. You go to asexualoutreach.org. Also, you can go to the Asexual Goddess online on YouTube. Their channel is amazing, and also follow Yasmin Binwall. Their work is phenomenal, and the reason why I do what I do too.
Thank you, Marshall. Thank you so much. This was such an exciting conversation, and it's so fascinating. And I think the work that is happening in this space is making everything that we do so much more comprehensive and so much more sensible and so much stronger. So thank you for everything that you are doing. If we could ever help amplify any of your stuff, let us know. Promise that you will come back and talk to us again and tell us.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, Marshall. We'll see you soon.
See you soon. Thank you so much.
I get so excited during these conversations. You get to learn all these things that you didn't know. I mean, who gets this kind of access to be able to talk to people that are different? It's the best thing in the whole world. So a few things that we need to do as we wrap up today. So first thing, I'm donating a book every single week. Once again, I'm going to have to order my books because the one that I want to donate for this week is actually on my iPad. So this week I will be doing Angela Chen's book, Ace. We had Angela Chen last year, and she was amazing and fascinating. So if you've never read her book, I definitely encourage you to check it out. My local library is going to be getting a copy when I bring my wheelbarrow of books to them in a couple of weeks.
Next week, a few things that you need to know. Next week, we are going to be commemorating Read Across America Day. And so you can learn more about what PFLAG is doing in that space if you go to pflag.org/readwithlove. Also on Twitter, make sure you are telling us what you are doing when you are reading with love to fight the massive amount of book bans and pushback that we are seeing in that space. And next week, you definitely want to be here for this show. We are going to be interviewing one of my biggest idols, Kate Bornstein. As we always like to say, the queer and pleasant danger. She is incredible. She has had multiple books banned over the years. You definitely want to be here to see this unbelievable queer icon with us. But until next week, please take care of yourselves. We close the same way every single week. We remind you to run fast, laugh hard, and most of all, be kind. And please, if you haven't been vaccinated, do so and get your boosters too. My name is Jean Marie Nevada. If you need help, please visit pflag.org. Otherwise, we'll see you again next week. Bye, everybody.